Hi students, so we're going to work through this pre-recorded lesson during our period this morning, and we're just going to look at different types of learning curves and study methods, but it's going to be more my version of how I see things and how I've experienced it as I have worked my way through school and university. And I really just want to share that with you. And I really hope that it will inspire you to change the way you think and learn and how you act when you are in the classroom and also at home. And so before we actually start, I just want to share who I am. Some of you know me as Mrs. Reinders. You've seen me probably at the back of some of your classrooms, but I'm a student teacher at the moment. And I'm currently doing my teacher qualification, and also I'm working on my master's degree in chemistry education. So I've chosen a few pictures that I think represent me, and I wonder if you go back home and you try and do the same thing, whether you would be able to put together a collage of images that represents you. And I actually had to go and search on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn for some pictures. And I feel that the pictures that I've chosen really represents me and the stages that I went through in my life. And I hope that you girls also, when you go home and you look at your Facebook and your Instagram and your LinkedIn and all your other accounts, that the pictures that you see on social media really represents the real you, and it's not just a virtual identity that you have created. So just in short, who am I? And so this picture here actually just represents my growing up and how I've always wanted to become some sort of biologist or archaeologist or microbiologist. I always had so many dreams in the natural sciences to pursue a career in that direction. And for the most part of it, I really wanted to become an environmental activist. But as I went through university, I started realizing that I am in love with chemistry and the sciences of chemistry, and figuring out and discovering things and trying to understand why things are as they are. And through this process, I just realized that I'm in love with teaching also. And so I taught at a school for almost 2 years, and I really enjoy teaching practical sciences and really just transferring my knowledge to others and helping them and facilitating them to learn. Yeah, and through that process, I decided to do my teacher qualification and then my master's degree. So I really feel that this represents me. And there's a saying that I feel represents and defines me as a person. And I feel that to discover the purpose of your life as a creation, you need to discover the purpose of your life through the eyes of the Creator. And I truly believe that as you journey through this process of discovering who you are, you will see the beauty of you and you will see the potential that you have. Okay, so in this presentation, I'm just going to show you that you have the potential to grow into the best version of you. So we are going to just look at how can we think, or how do we think, and how can we change the way we think. How do we learn? What is the approach and strategy that you have? And how do you act? What is your plan of action when you need to study for an exam? And how do you reflect? How do you reflect upon your strategy and your plan of action and your mindset to improve your studying process and your learning going forward? So before we can just jump into everything, I just want to briefly talk about how the brain learns and how learning neural circuits form in our brains to form cognitive maps. And essentially, it is these cognitive maps that allow you to retrieve information from a folder in your brain. So neurons that fire together wire together. So essentially these signals shoot through these neurons, and these neurons sort of wire together to form sort of a structure that almost looks like a tree. It looks like a bunch of branches, and you could see clearly from this image, this is a typical dendritic growth in an active brain, in comparison to an inactive brain that only shows one dendrite. So this whole structure here is known as a dendron, and it is actually translated into the same word as tree. So it actually represents a tree in that sense. So initially it was thought that the brain is unchangeable and it remains fixed, but it is not. It is actually constantly changing as you construct new neural circuits through the process of learning. So the first thing we will look at is learn how to think and learn how to change your mindset. So it's actually quite interesting. We can go for 3 weeks without food. We can go for 3 days without water, but we cannot even go for 3 seconds without thinking. So our mind is the biggest part of us, and it really determines how we think, how we feel, and how we choose. So the mind is not the brain, but it uses the brain in response to our daily experiences. So the brain is built from dendrites, as we just looked at those dendrites that look like tree branches. So these all grow into a cognitive map as your knowledge grows. So the more you learn, the more you grow these neural circuits that look like a cognitive map. So the mind pushes energy through the brain. So as soon as you experience something, your mind actually transfers a signal through the brain, and your brain responds chemically or genetically or even electromagnetically to that signal, and it actually builds physical proteins which gets expressed in your genes, and it influences your actions and your behavior. So it is not only a thing that happens outside of the body, it happens in your mind, but it controls your brain, and that controls your biological expression and physical behavior in your genes. So it's really a process that does not only affect your mental well-being, but it also influences how your brain is put together and your biology is constructed through how you think. So essentially, what I'm saying is that what you think about yourself and the types of thoughts that you have in your head could biologically influence how you see yourself and also how you see others around you. So, and I put this picture of a tree here just to show you that your thoughts could either be positive and it could look like a tree that is alive, or it could be negative thoughts and the tree could look completely dead. And it really represents your brain and your mental well-being also. So in that booklet that you have, there's a handout, and there's a reflection 1 and 2 that you can now have a look at. You have to write out the thoughts that you're experiencing at school, your learning process, your academic journey, your results, and yourself. How do you think about those things? How do you feel about those things? And the second reflection is just, if your thoughts represented a tree, would you say that the tree is dead or alive? And also explain why you think so. So I'm just going to pause the video here and allow you some time, maybe a minute or 30 seconds or so, just to write your thoughts on that. Okay, so after you have reflected a bit on that, I want to tell you that your thoughts and your mindset can be represented by a tree. This is actually a picture I took in Botswana of a baobab tree, a very young one, but it just is absolutely stunning. And you know, if you look at that and you feel like that represents you, then it's beautiful. And so I just want to tell you that your thoughts and your mindset really determines how you look at yourself. And so this work has been actually proposed by a South African neuroscientist, Dr. Caroline Leaf. And she said that when you look at a tree and you look at its branches, it represents the dendrites that you have in your brain. So your roots represent your story of origin, your background, your contextual realities. Your perspective of life is represented by the trunk of the tree. And when you look at the branches, it represents your emotions. And these emotional memories that connect to the emotions are represented by the leaves on the tree. So all of these components make up your thoughts, and that influences your perspective, your behaviors, and your emotions. So you might ask me, what does this have to do with learning? But by looking at your behavior, you get insight into thoughts. And by looking at your thoughts, you get insight into the emotion and the memories in your thoughts. And this gives you perspective of your life. It tells you more about how you learn and how you build your story from where it has originated. So without a positive mindset, you cannot even think about learning. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then you have already failed just before, even before starting the studying process. So if you have a negative mindset, you do not want to study, you do not feel motivated, and you have already decided that you are not good enough. So why do you then even have to try? And so that is why I'm asking you to now reflect on this and look at this tree in your handout. And I want you to write a few words that represent your origin story, a few words that represent your perspective, a few words that represent some of the emotions that you are experiencing, and some of your memories that influences how you feel. And I want you to really think about this as a holistic picture of why you feel motivated to learn, or why you feel demotivated to study, and do you believe in yourself? So I'm just going to pause the video for 30 seconds or a minute, and I just want you to reflect on that and just write down your words. Okay, so I just want to share this slide with you. So there was a psychologist, his name was Erik Erikson, and he proposed this model of the stages of psychosocial development. And it just shows that when we are at different stages in our life, we go through different conflicts and things that we need to deal with. And so he said that when you are at your school age, you are going to be in this period where you battle with industry versus inferiority. And this is where you now need to figure out, but what do I actually want to do with my life? And where am I going? And what skills do I have? And what is my passion? And what is my purpose? And you start battling with these things. Am I competent enough? Do I have the knowledge for this? Can I achieve this? Do I have the right grades for this? And if you feel that you don't, then you start feeling incompetent and you start feeling that you are not good enough. But I just want to tell you here that there is more than enough time for you to figure this out as you go through your journey. But you have to start somewhere, and you have to start looking at what are your interests and what are you passionate about. So this reflection 4 on your handout, I actually want you to do this at home, because this is a process that takes time. And I want you to ask yourself, who am I? And where am I going? And what is my passion? And what skills do I have? What interests do I have? So there's no correct or right answer for these questions. And if you don't have answers, that's also fine. It just is about getting your head into that process of thinking who you are and who you would like to be one day. And, discovering yourself and feeling positive about it and really excited about it. And, it took me a very long time to only realize that I want to become a teacher for the rest of my life. So, and maybe even that might change in the future. But, it takes time, and you need to accept that, and you need to work with that. Okay, so then we now get to the next step. How do we learn? And what is the approach and the strategy that I should use when I study? So I just want to tell you here that there's no such thing as one size fits all in the process of learning. It really is a journey that you need to discover so that you can figure out what works the best for you. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about the theories of learning, but at the end of the day, you need to go onto this journey and discover your own learning approach. So the first theory that I would like to share with you is the theory of cognitive overload, and it is based on this model of how our brains process information. So first of all, what happens inside or outside of the classroom is that you get ideas, events, and concepts that are being taught. You can then decide from this information, what are you going to process in your working memory, and what are you going to reject? So the information that you think is most important will stay here in your working memory. Then, from your working memory, you can then decide to store this into your long-term memory. So, storage in the long-term memory can then also be retrieved back into your working memory. So, whenever you write exams, or you need to apply your knowledge in a project, or you need to recall your knowledge, you go back to your long-term memory, which represents these folders in your brain, and you open up the folder and you retrieve some of the information back into your working memory. However, there's a bit of a problem, and the problem is here with your working memory. So our working memory has a limited capacity. That means that we can only process a certain amount of knowledge at a time, and a certain amount of new information at a time. So therefore, if you study, you should study in a gradual process where you allow your brain to process chunks of information. Okay, instead of just cramming everything right at once just before the exam. The reason for that is if you do not process it gradually and you cram it in before the exam, then that information will not be stored in your long-term memory. It is going to be in your working memory, and it's going to move out of your working memory, and it will not be stored for a longer term. So I'm sure all of you have experienced that feeling. If it feels like your brain has completely burnt out and there's just zero brain juices left. And that is what cognitive overload feels like. It's just you can only process a certain amount of information, and you need to know when to take breaks and to limit the amount of chapters that you study per hour or per day. And you need to space your learning out. So with keeping that in mind, I want to ask you where you stand. Are you somebody that rote learns? So in other words, you cram everything in your head, and it's also known as surface learning. So everything is just short-term memorization, cramming in before your exams. There's no long-term storage of memory. Or are you someone that follows a meaningful learning approach where you really think about what you are learning and you understand what you are learning? So this is a deeper approach, and it involves students to integrate new learning with their prior knowledge, and they also engage with the information rather than just trying to recall and memorize everything. So I want you to now look at reflection 5, and I want you to answer that question: where do you see yourself? Are you someone that rote learns, or are you someone that really takes time to learn meaningfully? And why do you think so? So I'll just give you 30 seconds to quickly complete that question. So if you are a rote learner and you realize that you've been cramming everything up until now, and you've been wondering why you always struggle to recall information during an exam, then I want to teach you about how to learn meaningfully. And so I need to introduce you to this theory of constructivism. And so this theory says that as a learner, you can construct your own understanding and your own knowledge based on your prior knowledge and what you already know. So when you walk into that classroom every day, as teachers, we know that you are not an empty silo. We know that you are a source of prior knowledge and information of everything that you have learned up until now. And so, as teachers, we cannot dump knowledge into your heads and then you just need to download the information and recall it. That's not what learning is, okay, at all. So, we as teachers are only the facilitators of knowledge. We are just providing the knowledge. But it is your responsibility to take that knowledge and to construct it in your brain during this whole process of information processing. So if I could put it in a different way, if these represent you, and let's say your knowledge that grows represents these little trees, then as teachers we can constantly pour out water onto these plants, and the water represents knowledge, but we can pour as much water as we like, but it is your job as a plant to utilize the water and to use it for the purposes of growing and for the chemical reactions and photosynthesis in the plant, and to be able to absorb nutrients from the soil. And you need to integrate the water into your structure and construct it into your growth. And that's what knowledge is. We can give you as much knowledge as we would like to, But if you, as a learner, if you are not going to work with this knowledge and integrate it into your structure and your brain and deal with it and understand it and construct it, then it is not going to grow. You're not going to grow in your understanding or in your knowledge or even in your learning process. So that's important, is remember that you are responsible for constructing your own knowledge. As a teacher, we are just here to facilitate the process, but it remains your choice to grow while you are learning and to therefore learn meaningfully. So this brings me to another theory, and this is Vygotskys' theory of the zone of proximal development. And essentially it says that this is you, this represents you, the learner, and there's different zones of development. So in the first zone, you can do everything on your own and it's fairly quite easy. In the second zone, you really need some help. But in the third zone, it's things that you cannot do, no matter how much support you get. And that's the role of a teacher. A teacher is a mediator of learning. And we are there to help you, to guide you, so that you can construct your own knowledge. So we're only there to provide a scaffold. But you need to understand that we need to challenge you into this more difficult zone, because we need to push you to think critically and to solve problems through understanding and not just through rote learning. And this is all based on how we learn meaningfully. So you need to understand that you need to get out of your comfort zone. You cannot stay here for the rest of from grade 8 to matric. Then you are never going to develop and you're never going to grow your knowledge, and you will always struggle to learn. So you need to get out of that comfort zone and move into a more challenging zone where you get to push yourself and where you get to construct your own knowledge throughout your entire journey. Okay, but you need a plan of action. And this is where Bloom's taxonomy comes in. There's different levels within this plan. You need to remember, you need to retrieve information, you need to understand it, see relationships, you need to be able to apply it, you need to be able to analyze it, evaluate it, and very importantly, you need to be able to create something with the knowledge. And this includes mind mapping, presentations, summaries, drawings on diagrams, whatever. But you need to work through these stages in order to show your own knowledge and understand your knowledge for when you study before an exam. So in 3 steps, there's a lot of steps, but I think these are the most important ones. Number 1, believe in yourself. Number 2, you need to plan and you need to have very good time management. And number 3, you need to learn how to construct your own knowledge. So ask questions, investigate solutions, gather information, share that with your friends, and also reflect on the knowledge that you are constructing. So I'm going to pause the video. I want you to take 20 seconds to look at reflection 6. What is your plan of action before you study for an exam? How do you plan your time? Do you ask questions? So I want you to quickly have a look at that question. Okay, so this is the last step, is you need to learn how to reflect. You have to go back to this tree and go back to what you have written down and all the reflections that you have written about. And you need to think about how can you improve your learning approach and how can you improve the way you think, change your mindset, be more strategic, form a plan of action, and improve the way you learn in this lifelong journey of learning and discovering. And that leaves me with one question. Who are you? What defines you? And what represents you? So thank you for listening. Please come and talk to me at any time. I would love to hear your story and I would like to be part of your journey.